It was a bright, sunny afternoon. The sky was blue, with fluffy white clouds floating high above. At the airport, a big plane called Flight 247 was getting ready to take off. People were lined up at Gate 12, chatting and laughing as they waited to climb aboard. The plane was shiny, with a long white body and blue stripes on the sides. It looked strong and ready to zoom through the sky. One of the people stepping onto the plane was a man named Marcus Jones. Marcus was tall, like a basketball player, and he had a big, friendly smile that made you feel happy just looking at him. He wasn't fancy or loud. He wore a plain gray hoodie that was soft and comfy, and blue jeans that fit just right. Over his shoulder, he carried a small black backpack, nothing too big or heavy. In his hand, he held his boarding pass, a little piece of paper that told him where he'd sit on the plane. To everyone watching, Marcus seemed like a regular guy. Just another person going on a trip, maybe to visit family or take a vacation. No one stared at him or whispered about him. He blended right in with the crowd. But here's the thing, Marcus wasn't just a regular passenger. Oh no. He had a secret, something special hidden up his sleeve. Nobody knew it yet, not the other passengers, not the workers, not even the pilot. But soon, that secret was going to turn this whole flight into a crazy adventure. It was going to flip everything upside down, and people would never forget it. Inside the plane, it was busy and loud. People were all over the place, trying to get settled. Some were stuffing their bags into the overhead bins, those little compartments up above the seats. The bags were all different colors, red, blue, black, and even a bright yellow one with flowers on it. A lady in a pink shirt pushed her suitcase hard, trying to make it fit. "Come on, squeeze in there," she muttered to herself. A man with a big beard tugged at his green duffel bag, grunting as he shoved it into place. Kids were giggling, running a little down the aisle before their parents called them back. "Sit down, Timmy," a mom shouted, holding a baby who was chewing on a toy. The seats were lined up in rows, 3 on each side of the aisle. They had soft cushions, colored a boring gray, but they looked cozy enough. The windows were small and round, letting in bits of sunshine that danced on the walls. The air smelled like coffee and snacks, because some people were already munching on pretzels they'd brought along. It was a normal day on a plane, at least, that's what everyone thought. Marcus walked down the aisle, his sneakers squeaking a tiny bit on the floor. He didn't rush or push. He just moved along, calm and easy, like he had all the time in the world. In his head, he was probably thinking about his seat. He looked down at his boarding pass again, just to be sure. Yep, there it was in black ink, seat 14B. That meant row 14, seat B, the middle spot in a group of 3. Not the window, not the aisle, but right in between. Marcus didn't mind. He was happy to sit anywhere, as long as he could relax and enjoy the ride. He kept walking, counting the rows as he went. Row 10. Row 11. Row 12. The numbers were stuck on little signs above the seats, easy to read. People were still moving around him, chatting and bumping into each other. A little boy with a superhero backpack waved at Marcus as he passed. Marcus waved back, giving him that big, warm smile. The boy grinned and then hid behind his dad's leg, peeking out to watch Marcus go by. Finally, Marcus reached row 14. He stopped and looked at the seats. There they were, 14A, 14B, 14C. The window seat, 14A, was empty. The middle seat, 14B, was his. And the aisle seat, 14C, had a lady already sitting there. She had curly brown hair and was reading a magazine about dogs. She didn't look up as Marcus stepped closer. He was about to slide into his spot when bam, someone else showed up. That someone was Karen Miller. Karen was a flight attendant, one of the people who help passengers on the plane. She wore a dark blue uniform with a shiny badge pinned to her chest. The badge had her name on it in big letters, Karen M. Her hair was pulled back tight in a bun, not a single strand out of place. She looked neat and proper, like someone who followed all the rules. But her voice? Oh, it was loud and sharp, like a teacher yelling at a noisy class. And her eyes? They were narrow and mean, staring right at Marcus like he'd done something wrong. Karen didn't smile. She didn't say hi. Instead, she stood there with her hands on her hips, blocking Marcus's way. She looked him up and down his hoodie, his jeans, his backpack, like she was trying to figure him out. Her lips pressed together tight, and her eyebrows went up, making her look mad already. To her, Marcus didn't fit. He didn't look like he belonged on this plane, or maybe in that seat. She didn't know why yet, but she was sure something was off. And Karen wasn't the type to wait and find out. She was the type to act fast and loud. Marcus didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, holding his boarding pass, ready to sit down. He wasn't scared or upset. His face stayed calm, and that friendly smile didn't go away. He had no idea what was about to happen, but he wasn't worried. Why should he be? He had his ticket. He was in the right place. Everything was fine, right? Well, not for long. Karen took one more look at him, and then she opened her mouth. What came out wasn't nice or quiet. It was big, bold, and about to change everything. But let's not rush ahead. Let's take it slow and see how this all started, step by step. The plane kept buzzing around them. People were still finding their seats, talking and laughing. A man in a red hat dropped his water bottle, and it rolled under a seat. "Oops," he said, bending down to grab it. A girl with pigtails was coloring in a book, her crayons spilling onto the tray table. "Mom, look at my picture," she called out. The lady in 14C flipped a page in her magazine, not paying attention to Marcus or Karen. Nobody else noticed what was happening yet. It was just Marcus and Karen, standing there, about to kick off something wild. Marcus adjusted his backpack on his shoulder. It wasn't heavy, just a few things inside, like a book and maybe a snack. He liked to travel light. He didn't need much. His hoodie had a little hole near the sleeve, but he didn't care. It was his favorite one, soft from being washed so many times. His jeans were a little faded too, but they were comfy. He looked like any kid's cool uncle or a friendly neighbor. Nothing about him screamed trouble. But Karen didn't see it that way. Her badge sparkled under the plane's lights. It wasn't just a name tag, it was her power. She'd been a flight attendant for years, and she liked being in charge. She told people where to sit, what to do, and how to behave. Most of the time, they listened. She was used to that. But today, something about Marcus rubbed her the wrong way. Maybe it was his calm face or his simple clothes. Maybe she thought he looked too relaxed, like he didn't care about the rules. Whatever it was, Karen wasn't happy. She took a step closer to Marcus. Her shoes clicked on the floor, black and shiny, part of her uniform. She smelled like strong perfume, the kind that makes you sneeze if you get too close. Marcus didn't move back. He just waited, holding his boarding pass out a little, like he was ready to show it to her. He wasn't trying to fight. He wasn't mad. He was just Marcus. Cool, quiet Marcus with a secret nobody saw coming. The air felt different now. Not because of the weather outside, it was still sunny and warm out there, but because of Karen. She was like a dark cloud moving in, ready to rain on Marcus's day. The other passengers didn't know it yet, but they were about to see something big. Something that would make them gasp, whisper, and maybe even cheer. But we're not there yet. Let's stick with this moment, right here at row 14. Marcus looked at his seat again, 14B. It was empty, waiting for him. The cushion looked soft, and he could already imagine sitting down, kicking back, and reading his book. He'd picked a good one from the library, a story about pirates and treasure. He loved adventure books. They made him feel like anything could happen. And today? Anything was going to happen. He just didn't know how wild it would get. Karen's eyes locked on him. She didn't like waiting. She didn't like people who didn't jump when she said jump. "Hey," she said, her voice cutting through the noise of the plane. It wasn't a friendly hey. It was a bossy hey, like she was about to tell him off. Marcus turned his head a little, meeting her stare. His smile stayed, but his eyes got a tiny bit sharper. Not mean, just ready. The lady in 14C finally looked up from her magazine. She peeked over the pages, curious now. The man in the red hat stopped digging for his water bottle and watched. The girl with the crayons paused, her red crayon hovering over her paper. Something was happening. They could feel it. And they were right. Karen took a deep breath, like she was about to yell. Her chest puffed up, and her badge bounced a little. She pointed at Marcus, her finger stiff and straight. "You," she said, loud and clear. "What are you doing here?" Marcus blinked. He didn't expect that. He thought she'd just check his ticket and move on. But Karen wasn't moving on. She was starting something. Something big. And Marcus? He was ready for it, even if he didn't show it yet. The plane kept humming. The engines were warming up outside, making a low rumble you could feel in your feet. The sun shone through the windows, bright and golden. It was a perfect day to fly until Karen opened her mouth again. What she said next would kick off the whole crazy mess. But let's not rush. Let's stay right here, with Marcus standing tall and Karen glaring hard. He held his boarding pass a little higher. "This is my seat," he said. His voice was soft but strong, like he wasn't scared at all. 14B. See. He turned the paper so she could read it. The black ink was clear as day. Marcus Jones, seat 14B, flight 247. Simple. Easy. No tricks. Karen didn't take it. She didn't even look at it. Her eyes stayed on his face, like she was trying to catch him in a lie. "I don't think so," she said, her voice getting louder. "You don't belong here." Marcus tilted his head a tiny bit. "Why not?" he asked. He wasn't mad. He was just curious. Why was she so sure he was wrong? What did she see that he didn't? Karen's face got red. She didn't like questions. She liked answers. Her answers. "Because I said so," she snapped. "Now move." The lady in 14C put her magazine down. The man in the red hat sat up straight. The girl with the crayons whispered, "Uh." They were all watching now. Something was brewing, like a pot about to boil over. And Marcus? He didn't move. Not an inch. That's when it hit. This wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about Karen and Marcus, two people standing face to face, ready to clash. And that secret Marcus had? It was still tucked away, waiting for the perfect moment to jump out and surprise everyone. The plane felt smaller now. The air felt tighter. People stopped shoving bags and started staring. A man with glasses in row 13 turned around. A lady with a big purse in row 15 leaned into the aisle. They didn't know what was coming, but they knew it was something. Something they'd talk about later, maybe over dinner or with their friends. Marcus kept his cool. His smile didn't fade. His hand didn't shake. He was like a rock in a river, steady while the water rushed around him. Karen was the water, loud, fast, and ready to crash. But rocks don't move easy. And Marcus wasn't moving. Karen stepped even closer. Her shoes clicked again. Her badge caught the light, flashing like a warning. "I'm not playing," she said. "Get out of that seat. Now." Marcus looked at her. Really looked at her. His brown eyes were calm, but there was something in them, a spark, a little fire. Not anger, not yet. Just, knowing. He knew something she didn't. And that made her madder. "I have my ticket," he said again. "Check it?" Karen huffed. "I don't need to check it," she said. "I know people like you. Always causing trouble." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "People like me?" he asked. His voice was still soft, but it had an edge now. Not sharp, just firm. Like he was asking her to explain, even though he already knew what she meant. The lady in 14C frowned. The man in the red hat muttered, "What's her problem?" The girl with the crayons hugged her book close. The plane was quiet now, except for Karen's voice and the hum of the engines. Everyone was listening. Everyone was waiting. Karen didn't back down. "Yeah," she said. "People like you. Now move, or I'll make you." Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't yell. He just stood there, tall and steady, with that secret still hidden. What was it? Nobody knew, not Karen, not the passengers, not even me telling you the story yet. But it was there, waiting to pop out like a jack-in-the-box. And when it did, oh, it was going to be good. The sun kept shining outside. The plane kept rumbling. And Marcus kept standing. Karen glared, her face redder than ever. This was at the start of something huge. Something that would flip flight 247 upside down in just a few minutes. But for now, it was just Marcus and Karen, locked in a stare-down, with the whole plane watching. What would happen next? Would Karen win? Would Marcus give up? Or would that secret come out and change everything? Stick around, because this story's just getting started. Marcus had just reached row 14 on the plane. He stopped and looked at the seats, 14A by the window, 14B in the middle, and 14C on the aisle. His ticket said 14B, so that's where he was going. He slid into the middle seat, smooth and easy, like he'd done this a million times. The seat was soft, with a gray cushion that felt nice under him. He wiggled a little to get comfy, then reached into his small black backpack. Out came a book, a cool one about pirates chasing treasure. Marcus loved stories like that. He flipped it open to the first page, ready to read and relax while the plane took off. The plane was still noisy around him. People were settling in, clicking their seat belts, and chatting. A little boy a few rows ahead was playing with a toy car, making vroom vroom sounds. A lady with a big purple hat was digging in her purse, pulling out a bag of candy. "Want one?" she asked the man next to her. He nodded and took a red gummy bear, smiling. The air smelled like pretzels and coffee, and the sun peeked through the tiny round windows, making little bright spots on the walls. Everything seemed normal. Everyone was happy, well, almost everyone. That's when Karen showed up. Karen Miller, the flight attendant, came marching down the aisle like a hawk zooming in on a mouse. Her dark blue uniform was crisp and stiff, and her shiny badge sparkled under the plane's lights. Her shoes clicked loud on the floor, click, 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 like she wanted everyone to know she was coming. Her hair was tied back in a tight bun, so tight it looked like it hurt. But her face? Oh, her face was mad already. Her eyes were small and sharp, and her lips were pressed together like she was biting back a yell. She stopped right at row 14, right in front of Marcus. Marcus didn't see her at first. He was looking down at his book, reading about a pirate ship sailing through a storm. But then he heard her voice, loud, bossy, and mean. "Excuse me," she snapped. Her words cut through the air like a knife. They were so loud that half the plane could hear her, even over the hum of the engines warming up outside. People turned their heads. The boy with the toy car stopped his vroom vroom noises. The lady with the candy froze, a green gummy bear halfway to her mouth. Everyone wanted to know what was going on. Marcus looked up from his book, slow and calm. His big, friendly smile was still there, like nothing could shake him. He didn't jump or look scared. He just tilted his head a little, like he was curious about why she sounded so mad. Karen glared down at him, her arms stiff at her sides. "You're in the wrong seat," she said, her voice sharp like a teacher scolding a kid who forgot their homework. "Move. Now." Marcus didn't move. He stayed right where he was, sitting in 14B. He blinked once, then spoke in a voice that was soft but strong. "This is my seat, ma'am," he said. "It's 14B. Here's my ticket." He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out the little piece of paper, his boarding pass. It was white with black writing, folded a little from being in his pocket. He held it out to her, nice and polite, so she could see for herself. The ticket had his name, Marcus Jones, and his seat, 14B, printed clear as day. But Karen didn't take it. She didn't even look at it. Her eyes stayed locked on Marcus, like she was trying to burn a hole through him with her stare. Her face twisted up, and she sneered a mean, ugly look that made her nose wrinkle. "I don't think so," she said, her voice getting louder. "People like you always try to sneak into seats that aren't theirs. Get up." She pointed at him with one finger, jabbing the air like she was poking him from far away. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't get mad or yell back. He just sat there, holding his ticket, looking up at her with those calm brown eyes. But if you looked close, really close, you could see a tiny spark in his eyes. It wasn't anger or fear. It was something else, like a little secret twinkling in there. Like he knew something Karen didn't. Like he was waiting for the perfect moment to let it out. But he didn't say anything yet. He just watched her, quiet and cool. Around them, the plane started to buzz with whispers. A few passengers turned their heads to peek at row 14. The man sitting in 14A, the window seat next to Marcus, put down his phone and frowned. He was older, with gray hair and glasses, and he didn't look happy about Karen's loud voice. The lady in 14C, on the aisle, closed her dog magazine and leaned over a little to see what was happening. "What's her deal?" she muttered under her breath. A girl 2 rows back, with pigtails and a pink backpack, tugged on her mom's sleeve. "Mommy, why's that lady yelling?" she asked. Her mom shushed her, but she was watching too. Karen didn't care who was looking. She crossed her arms over her chest, her badge tilting a little as she moved. Her foot started tapping on the floor, tap, 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 like she was counting down the seconds until Marcus obeyed her. She was tall in her uniform, standing over him like a tower, and she wanted him to feel small. "I'm not asking again," she barked. Her voice was so loud now that even the people way in the back of the plane could hear it. It bounced off the walls, making the little cabin feel tighter, like the air was getting thick and heavy. Marcus still didn't move. He sat there in 14B, his book resting on his lap, his ticket still in his hand. He wasn't scared. He wasn't shaking. He looked up at Karen, steady as a rock, and said, "Ma'am, I'm in the right seat. Please look at my ticket." His words were simple and kind, like he was trying to help her understand. He wasn't fighting. He was just telling the truth. But Karen didn't want the truth. She didn't want his ticket. She shook her head fast, her bun wobbling a little. "No," she said. "I don't need to see it. I know what's going on here." Her eyes got smaller, squinting at him like he was a puzzle she didn't like. "You think you can just sit wherever you want? Not on my plane." She leaned closer, her voice dropping a little but still mean. "Get up, or I'll get someone to make you." The tension was growing now. It was like a big, dark storm cloud building up inside the plane. You could feel it in your chest, heavy and tight. The passengers were all watching, some with wide eyes, some with frowns. The man in 14A pushed his glasses up his nose and said, "Hey, he's got a ticket. Leave him alone." His voice was grumbly, like a grandpa who didn't like noise. Karen shot him a quick, angry glare and snapped, "Mind your own business." The man huffed and crossed his arms, but he didn't say anything else. The lady in 14C tilted her head. She didn't like Karen's tone either. She tucked her magazine under her arm and watched, her eyebrows going up. The little girl with pigtails whispered to her mom again, "Is the man in trouble?" Her mom patted her head and said, "SHH, let's see." More people were turning around now. A guy in a red hat a few rows up peeked over his seat. A woman with a big purse leaned into the aisle, stretching her neck to get a better look. Whispers floated around like little bees buzzing. "What's happening? Why's she so mad? Did he do something wrong?" Marcus heard the whispers, but he didn't look around. His eyes stayed on Karen. That tiny spark in them was still there, shining just a bit brighter now. He wasn't mad, but he wasn't backing down either. He held his ticket out again, patient and polite. "It's 14B, he said. "I'm not sneaking. This is my seat." His voice was like a cool breeze, steady and sure, cutting through Karen's loud storm. Karen's face got redder. She didn't like that he was so calm. She didn't like that he wasn't scared of her. She took a step closer, her shoes clicking loud again. Her badge bounced on her chest, catching the light. "I don't care what you say," she hissed. "You're not supposed to be here. I know it." She pointed at him again, her finger shaking a little now. "Get up, or you're off this plane." The plane got quieter. The boy with the toy car stopped playing. The lady with the candy put her bag down. Even the engines outside seemed to hum a little softer, like they were waiting too. Everyone was holding their breath, watching Marcus and Karen. It was like a movie. They didn't know what would happen next, but they couldn't look away. Marcus leaned back in his seat just a tiny bit. He closed his book, resting it on his knee. His hands were steady, not shaky at all. He looked at Karen, really looked at her, and said, "Why don't you check the ticket?" It wasn't a yell or a growl. It was quiet, but it had power. Like he was daring her to prove him wrong. Karen's eyes went wide for a second, like she couldn't believe he was talking back. Then they got small again, mean and hard. "I don't need to," she said. "I've seen this before. People like you, trying to trick me. It's not happening today." She crossed her arms tighter, her foot tapping faster, tap, 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 tap. She was like a bomb about to go off, and Marcus was the fuse she couldn't stop. The man in 14A grumbled again. "She's being silly," he muttered. The lady in 14C nodded a little, agreeing with him. The whispers got louder now, spreading through the plane. "He's got a ticket. Why won't she look? What's wrong with her?" People were picking sides, and most of them weren't on Karen's team. Marcus didn't say anything else yet. He just sat there, holding his ticket, waiting. That spark in his eyes was growing, like a little fire starting to burn. He wasn't going to fight her with shouts or fists. He didn't need to. He had something better, something Karen didn't see coming. But it wasn't time for that yet. For now, he let her talk, let her dig her own hole. Karen took a big breath, her chest puffing up. "Last chance," she said, loud and clear. "Move, or I'm calling security." Her voice echoed in the cabin, bouncing off the seats and the walls. The tension was so thick now, it was like you could touch it. The air felt hot and sticky, even though the plane's air conditioning was humming along. The little girl with pigtails hugged her mom's arm. "Is he going to jail?" she whispered. Her mom shook her head. "No, sweetie. He didn't do anything bad." The man in the red hat turned all the way around now, resting his chin on the back of his seat to watch. The lady with the big purse pulled out her phone, like she might start recording. Everyone was ready for something big. Marcus smiled just a little, just enough to make Karen matter. "I'm not moving," he said. "This is my seat." His voice was still soft, still calm, but it was like a wall she couldn't push over. He held up the ticket one more time, offering it to her. "Check it. Please." Karen's face was bright red now, like a tomato about to burst. She didn't take the ticket. She didn't check it. She just stared at him, her hands shaking a little. "You're done," she said. "You're out of here." She turned her head, looking down the aisle like she was about to call for help. "Security," she shouted, her voice cracking a bit. The plane went silent. Dead silent. No whispers, no rustling, no nothing. Just Karen's shout hanging in the air, and Marcus sitting there, cool as ever. The spark in his eyes was blazing now, but he didn't move. He didn't need to. Something was coming, something big, and Karen had no idea what she'd just started. The tension was like a rubber band stretched tight, ready to snap. The passengers leaned in, eyes wide. The man in 14A shook his head. The lady in 14C crossed her arms. The little girl peeked out from behind her mom. They all knew it, this wasn't over. Not even close. What would happen next? Would security come? Would Marcus get kicked off? Or would that spark in his eyes turn into something that flipped everything around? The storm was here, and it was only getting bigger. But for now, it was Marcus versus Karen, and neither of them was backing down. Marcus sat in seat 14B, his hands resting on his lap. He didn't move an inch, even though Karen was glaring at him like she wanted to zap him with lightning. Her loud words, "You're not fooling me," still hung in the air, but Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he looked up at her, calm and steady, and said something super quiet but super strong. "Check the ticket, please," he told her. His voice wasn't loud or mean. It was like a whisper you couldn't ignore, the kind that makes you listen even if you don't want to. Karen's face got tight. Her lips pressed together so hard they almost disappeared, like she was trying to hold back a big yell. She didn't like Marcus telling her what to do. She was the flight attendant. She was in charge. But Marcus didn't care about that. He just held out his boarding pass, the little white paper with his name and seat number on it. He didn't wave it around or shove it in her face. He just held it there, nice and still, waiting for her to take it. For a second, Karen didn't move. She stared at the ticket like it was a trick, like maybe it would bite her if she touched it. Then, fast as a cat pouncing on a mouse, she snatched it from his hand. Her fingers grabbed it so quick that the paper made a little whoosh sound. She held it up close to her face, squinting at the black letters like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Marcus Jones, seat 14B, flight 247. That's what it said, clear as the sun outside. Anyone could read it. Anyone could see Marcus was right. But then something funny happened. Karen froze. Her eyes got big for just a tiny moment, like she saw something she didn't expect. Her mouth opened a little, and her hand shook just a bit, so small you might miss it if you weren't looking close. It was like her brain said, "Uh-oh," but her face didn't want to admit it. Her confidence, the big, loud sureness she'd had, cracked, like a glass with a tiny chip in it. For that 1 second, she wasn't so tough anymore. But Karen didn't give up. Oh no. She wasn't going to let Marcus win that easy. She shook her head fast, making her tight bun wobble, and her lips pressed tight again. "This doesn't prove anything," she said, her voice sharp like a pencil snapping in half. She waved the ticket in the air like it was junk, like it didn't matter at all. "I know how this works. You're not fooling me." She leaned closer to Marcus, her eyes small and mean, like she was daring him to argue. Marcus didn't argue. He didn't yell or jump up. He just sat there in 14B, his gray hoodie soft against the seat, his book about pirates still on his lap. His face stayed calm, and that little spark in his eyes, the one that said he knew something special, got a tiny bit brighter. He wasn't loud or rude. He didn't need to be. Every word Karen said was making her look sillier, and Marcus knew it. It was like she was digging a hole with a big shovel, and he was just watching her fall in. The plane wasn't quiet anymore. People were starting to notice. The guy in 14A, the older man sitting by the window, couldn't stay quiet. He had gray hair sticking out under a blue cap, and glasses that slid down his nose a little. He looked grumpy, like someone who didn't like loud noises or mean people. He pushed his glasses up with one finger and turned to Karen. "Hey, lady," he said, his voice grumbly but clear. "He's got the ticket. Leave him alone." He pointed at Marcus with his thumb, like he was saying, "This guy's okay. Stop yelling." Karen's head whipped around so fast her badge bounced on her chest. She shot him a glare, a big, angry look that said, "Be quiet." Her eyes were like darts, sharp and pointy, aimed right at him. "Mind your business," she hissed. Her voice was low now, but still mean, like a snake warning you to stay away. The man in 14A huffed, puffing out his cheeks like a frog. He crossed his arms and muttered something under his breath, maybe "rude lady" or "what's her problem," but he didn't say anything else out loud. He just leaned back in his seat, still frowning. The lady in 14C, on the aisle, peeked over at Marcus. She had curly brown hair and a magazine with a fluffy dog on the cover. She didn't say anything, but her eyebrows went up, like she was thinking, "This is getting crazy." Across the aisle, in row 14 on the other side, a woman with a red shirt pulled out her phone. She was sneaky about it, holding it low so Karen wouldn't see. She tapped the screen, and a little light blinked on. She was recording. The phone's camera was pointed right at Marcus and Karen, catching every word, every glare, every move. Karen didn't notice the phone. She was too busy staring at Marcus, her arms crossed tight, her foot tapping fast, tap, 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 like a clock counting down to something big. But Marcus, he saw it. His eyes flicked to the woman with the phone, just for a tiny second. Nobody else caught it, but he did. And then, get this, he gave a little nod. It was so small, so quick, you'd miss it if you blinked. Like a secret signal. Like he'd been waiting for someone to start recording. Like he knew this was all part of a plan. The clock was ticking. Not a real clock you could see, but a feeling like time was running out for Karen, and something huge was about to happen. The plane hummed along, the engines rumbling soft outside. The sun shone through the little windows, making the cabin warm and bright. But the air inside felt heavy now, like a storm was brewing right there in row 14. Karen had no clue what was coming. None at all. People were shifting in their seats now, leaning closer to watch. The little girl with pigtails 2 rows back peeked over her mom's shoulder. Her pink backpack was squished next to her, and she held a crayon in her hand, forgotten. "Mommy, what's happening?" she whispered. Her mom patted her head. "Just watch, sweetie," she said, her eyes glued to Marcus and Karen. The man in the red had a few rows up, turned halfway around, his chin resting on his seat back. He chewed on a piece of gum, his jaw moving slow, but his eyes were wide open. A boy with a toy car in row 12 stopped rolling it on his tray table. He looked up, his mouth open a little. "Is she mad at him?" he asked his dad. His dad nodded, whispering, "Looks like it." A lady with a big purple hat in row 15 pulled a gummy bear from her bag, But she didn't eat it. She held it in her fingers, staring at Karen like she was on TV. Whispers started popping up all over the plane, soft and quick, like popcorn in a pan. What's she saying? He's got a ticket, right? Why's she so mean? Marcus heard the whispers, but he didn't look around. He kept his eyes on Karen, calm and steady. His hands rested on his book, his fingers tapping once, twice, like he was counting something in his head. That spark in his eyes was growing, shining like a tiny star. He wasn't scared. He wasn't mad. He was just waiting. Waiting for Karen to trip over her own words. Karen held the ticket up again, waving it like it was a flag she didn't like. This could be fake, she said, her voice loud and snappy. I've seen tricks like this before. You think I'm dumb? You think you can just sit here and I won't know? She leaned even closer, so close Marcus could probably smell her perfume, strong and flowery, like a garden gone wild. Her badge glinted in the light, and her foot kept tapping, tap, 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 faster now, like she was running out of patience. Marcus tilted his head a little. It's not fake, he said, still quiet, still firm. It's real. Check it. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Every time he spoke, it was like a little rock hitting Karen's big wall of anger. Not enough to break it yet, but enough to make cracks. Karen's face got redder. She didn't like that he was so calm. She didn't like that he wasn't scared of her. I don't have to check anything, she snapped. I know what's going on. You're in the wrong seat, and you're lying about it. She tossed the ticket back at him, not handing it, but throwing it, like it was trash. The paper fluttered down and landed on Marcus's book, right on the pirate ship on the cover. Marcus picked it up, slow and careful. He smoothed it out with his fingers, like it was something special. He didn't look mad. He didn't yell. He just put the ticket back in his pocket and said, I'm not lying. His voice was so steady, so sure, that it made Karen's loud words sound shaky. The guy in 14A grumbled again. She's being ridiculous, he muttered, loud enough for the lady in 14C to hear. She nodded, her curly hair bouncing a little. He's right, she whispered back. That ticket looks real to me. The woman with the phone across the aisle zoomed in closer, her thumb steady on the screen. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were bright, like she knew this was getting good. Karen spun around, looking down the aisle. Where's the other attendant? She barked, her voice echoing. I need backup. She waved her hand like she was calling for help, her badge flashing again. She wasn't giving up. She was doubling down, making her stand even bigger, even louder. But every move she made, every word she said, was digging that hole deeper. Marcus watched her. He didn't laugh or smirk. He didn't need to. People were starting to see it. Karen was wrong, and Marcus was right. The whispers got louder. She's crazy. He's not doing anything. What's her problem? The little girl with pigtails giggled softly. She's funny, she said to her mom. Her mom smiled but kept watching. A man in a green shirt a few rows back leaned over to his friend. Bet she's gonna regret this, he said. His friend nodded, chewing on a pretzel. Yep. He's too calm. Something's up. They were right. Something was up. That nod Marcus gave to the woman recording it wasn't just random. It was a clue, a tiny hint that something big was coming. But what? Nobody knew yet, not Karen, not the passengers, not even the guy in 14A grumbling about the noise. The plane felt smaller now. The air was thick, like before a thunderstorm. The engines hummed outside, low and steady, but inside, it was all about Marcus and Karen. She stood over him, her hands on her hips, her foot tapping like a drum. Tap, 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 tap. You're done, she said. You're out of here. I'm not playing. Marcus looked up at her, his eyes steady. That spark was a little flame now, burning bright but quiet. I'm not going anywhere, he said. This is my seat. He patted the cushion under him, like it was his home. His voice was still soft, still kind, but it had power, like a river that looks calm but runs deep. Karen's eyes went wide. What did you say? She asked, her voice cracking a little. She couldn't believe it. He was talking back quietly, sure, but talking back all the same. She took a step closer, so close her shadow fell over him. "You don't tell me what to do," she said. "I tell you." The woman with the phone smiled a tiny bit, like she was catching gold on video. The guy in 14A shook his head. "She's losing it," he muttered. The lady in 14C pulled out a pen, like she might start taking notes. The little girl with pigtails clapped her hands once, excited. "He's brave," she whispered. Marcus didn't budge. He sat there, his book on his lap, his backpack next to him, his hoodie soft and cozy. He wasn't loud. He wasn't rude. He didn't need to be. Karen's own words were tripping her up, making her look silly in front of everyone. And that nod he gave? That little hint he'd been waiting for this? It was starting to make sense. Something big was coming, something that would flip this whole mess upside down. The clock was ticking faster now, and Karen was running out of time. The tension was huge. People leaned forward in their seats, eyes locked on row 14. The boy with the toy car climbed onto his knees to see better. The lady with the purple hat forgot her gummy bears completely. The man in the red hat popped his gum, waiting. They could feel it, something was about to happen. Something that would make them gasp, maybe cheer, maybe laugh. And Marcus? He was ready. He'd been ready all along. Karen didn't see it. She didn't see the phone recording, the passengers watching, the hole she was digging. She just saw Marcus, sitting there, calm and cool, with that little flame in his eyes. She didn't know what it meant. She didn't know what was coming. But it was close, so close, and when it hit, she'd never forget it. 9 minutes had passed since Karen first yelled at Marcus. 9 whole minutes of her loud voice, her mean glares, and her tapping foot. It felt like forever on that plane, with everyone watching, whispering, and waiting. The little cabin was buzzing with tension, like a rubber band stretched so tight it might snap any second. Marcus sat in seat 14B, calm and cool, while Karen stood over him, her face red and her hands on her hips. She thought she was winning. She thought she was in charge. But oh boy, was she wrong. The plane was humming along, the engines making a soft rumble outside. People were still in their seats, some leaning forward, some peeking over the tops of their chairs. The little girl with pigtails clutched her crayon, her eyes big. The man in the red hat chewed his gum slow, watching. The woman with the phone kept recording, her thumb steady on the screen. Nobody knew what was coming, not Karen, not the passengers, not even the lady in 14C with her dog magazine. But it was close. So close. Then it happened. The plane's intercom crackled to life. You know that speaker thing up above the seats? It made a funny noise, bzzzt, crackle, like it was waking up. Everyone froze, even Karen. A deep voice came through, loud and clear, filling the whole cabin. "Attention, passengers," it said. "This is your captain speaking." The voice was strong, like a teacher calling the class to order. People sat up straight, listening hard. Even the boy with the toy car stopped rolling it and looked up. Karen rolled her eyes. She crossed her arms tighter, her shiny badge tilting on her chest. "Oh, great," she muttered under her breath, so quiet only Marcus heard it. She thought this was just some boring announcement, maybe about the weather or the flight time. She didn't think it had anything to do with her. She was too busy glaring at Marcus, waiting for security to come drag him off the plane. She was sure she'd won. But the captain wasn't done talking. "We've got a special guest on board today," the captain said. His voice sounded happy, like he was sharing good news. Karen huffed a little, tapping her foot again, tap, 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 like she didn't care. She figured it was some fancy person in first class, someone with lots of money or a big name. Not her problem. She kept her eyes on Marcus, her lips pressed tight, ready to say something mean again. But then the captain kept going, and everything changed. "Please welcome Marcus Jones," the captain said, "regional manager for Sky High Airlines. He's here to oversee our cruise performance." The words came out slow and big, like they were meant to sink in deep. Marcus Jones. Regional manager. Sky High Airlines. The captain's voice bounced off the walls, loud and proud, and then bam, it stopped. The cabin went dead silent. Not a whisper. Not a cough. Not even a rustle. It was like someone hit a big mute button on the whole plane. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Every eye turned to Marcus, sitting there in 14B with his gray hoodie and his pirate book. Karen's face changed fast. Her red cheeks went pale white as a sheet of paper, like all the color drained out of her. Her mouth opened a little, like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Her eyes got huge, staring at Marcus like he just turned into a ghost. Marcus didn't rush. He didn't jump up and shout. He moved slow and steady, like he had all the time in the world. He reached down to his small black backpack, resting by his feet. His hands were calm, not shaky at all. He unzipped the bag's zip and pulled something out. It wasn't just his boarding pass this time. Oh no. It was a badge, a real, shiny badge with the Sky High Airlines logo on it. The logo was a blue bird with wings spread wide, and under it, in big letters, it said, Marcus Jones, Regional Manager. The badge sparkled in the light, like a treasure from one of his pirate stories. He stood up, tall and strong, holding the badge so everyone could see. The plane was so quiet you could hear his sneakers squeak on the floor. He looked right at Karen, his brown eyes steady, that little spark now a big, bright flame. Hi, Karen, he said, his voice smooth but firm, like a teacher who knows they're right. I think we need to talk. The cabin exploded, not with noise, but with shock. Passengers gasped, their mouths falling open. The little girl with pigtails clapped her hands over her face, her crayon dropping to the floor. Whoa, she squeaked. The man in 14A, the older guy with glasses, pushed his cap back and whistled low. Well, I'll be, he said. The lady in 14C dropped her magazine, the fluffy dog on the cover sliding under her seat. Her eyes were wide, like saucers. The woman with the phone across the aisle zoomed in fast, her fingers quick on the screen. She caught every second Marcus standing up, the badge shining, Karen's white face. She didn't say a word, but her lips curved into a tiny smile, like she knew she'd just recorded something huge. The man in the red hat popped his gum loud pop, and grinned. Told you something was up, he muttered to himself. Karen stammered. Her voice came out shaky, like a broken toy. I didn't know, she started, her hands flapping a little, like she didn't know what to do with them. Her badge bounced on her chest, and her tight bun looked messy now, with a few hairs sticking out. She took a tiny step back, her shiny shoe slipping just a bit. She looked small all of a sudden, not the big, loud flight attendant anymore, but someone caught doing something wrong. Marcus cut her off, his voice still smooth but sharp now, like a knife cutting through butter. You didn't ask, he said. You assumed. And you were wrong. He didn't yell. He didn't need to. His words hit like thunder, loud and strong, even though they were quiet. They crashed into Karen, into the plane, into everyone listening. The truth was out, and it was big, so big it shook the air. Marcus wasn't just some guy in a hoodie. He wasn't just a passenger with a ticket. He was the regional manager for Sky High Airlines, Karen's boss's boss. He was the one who made sure the planes ran right, the crews did their jobs, and the passengers were happy. He wasn't here for a vacation or a quick trip. He was here to watch the crew, to watch her. And she just yelled at him, in front of everyone, for 9 whole minutes. The passengers couldn't believe it. The little boy with the toy car turned to his dad. He's the boss, he asked, his voice squeaky with surprise. His dad nodded, his mouth open too. Yep, kiddo. Big boss. The lady with the purple hat dropped her gummy bears, the little candies rolling under her seat. Oh my goodness, she whispered, her hands on her cheeks. The man in the green shirt a few rows back laughed out loud. She's toast, he said to his friend, who nodded and grabbed another pretzel. Karen's face went from white to red again, like a light switching on. I didn't mean, she tried again, but her words tripped over each other. She looked around, her eyes darting fast, like she was searching for a way out. But there was no way out. Everyone was staring, passengers, Marcus, even the woman with the phone, who was still recording every shaky breath she took. Marcus held up his badge a little higher. The blue bird on it seemed to fly in the light, proud and strong. I'm here to check on things, he said, his voice clear so everyone could hear. To make sure the crew treats people right. And Karen, you didn't treat me right. He wasn't mean about it. He didn't point or shout. He just said it, like it was a fact, because it was. The whole plane had seen it. They'd heard her yell, snap, and sneer. They'd watched her wave his ticket like it was nothing. And now they knew who he really was. The woman with the phone zoomed in on Karen's face, catching the sweat on her forehead, the way her lips shook. The little girl with pigtails giggled again. "She's in trouble now," she said, loud enough for her mom to shush her. The man in 14A chuckled, his glasses slipping down his nose again. "Serves her right," he muttered. The lady in 14C picked up her magazine, but she didn't read it, she just fanned herself with it, her eyes still on Marcus. Karen tried one more time. I thought you were," she stammered, her hands twisting together. But Marcus shook his head, slow and steady. "You thought wrong," he said. "You didn't check my ticket. You didn't listen. You just yelled." His words were simple, but they hit hard, like rocks dropping into a puddle. Splash, splash, splash. Everyone made Karen shrink a little more. The truth was like a big thunderclap, loud and wild, rumbling through the plane. Marcus wasn't some sneaky passenger trying to trick her. He was the boss's boss, and she'd messed up big time. 9 minutes ago, she'd started yelling at him over a seat. Now, she was standing there, small and shaky, while he stood tall and strong. The whole plane saw it. The whole plane knew it. The boy with the toy car clapped his hands. "Cool," he said, bouncing in his seat. His dad laughed. "Yeah, pretty cool." The man in the red hat popped his gum again, pop, and gave Marcus a thumbs up. "Nice one, boss," he called out. The lady with the purple hat finally picked up her gummy bears, popping a yellow one in her mouth. "Best flight ever," she said to herself, smiling. Karen's hands dropped to her sides. Her badge didn't look so shiny anymore. Her tight bun was falling apart, and her uniform seemed wrinkled now, like it didn't fit right. She looked at Marcus, then at the passengers, then back at Marcus. I'm sorry," she whispered, so quiet you could barely hear it. But it was too late. Way too late. Marcus didn't smile or frown. He just nodded, like he'd heard her but wasn't ready to say anything back yet. He slipped his badge into his pocket, next to his boarding pass. He stood there in his hoodie and jeans, tall and steady, like a tree that doesn't bend in the wind. The plane was his now, not Karen's. Everyone knew it. The woman with the phone kept recording, her smile bigger now. She'd caught it all: the captain's voice, Marcus standing up, Karen stammering. It was gold, pure gold, and she knew it. The little girl with pigtails waved at Marcus. "Hi, boss man," she called, and her mom laughed. The man in 14A tipped his cap to Marcus, like a salute. The lady in 14C just stared, her magazine forgotten. The cabin wasn't silent anymore. It was alive, buzzing with gasps, whispers, and little laughs. The truth had hit, and it was huge. Marcus wasn't just some guy. He was the regional manager, and Karen had yelled at him like he was nobody. 9 minutes of her being loud and mean, and now she was the one who looked small. The big reveal was here, and it flipped everything upside down. The engines hummed outside, ready to go. The sun shone bright through the windows, lighting up Marcus like a hero in a story. Karen stood there, frozen, her face a mix of red and white, her hands shaking just a little. The passengers watched, some smiling, some shaking their heads, all amazed. The clock had stopped ticking. The moment was here, and it was bigger than anyone had guessed. Marcus looked at Karen one more time. "We'll talk more later," he said, his voice smooth and firm. He didn't need to say anything else. The truth was out, and it spoke for itself. Karen's outburst had started this mess, but Marcus's badge had ended it, or so everyone thought. There was more to come, but for now, this was the big bang, the thunderclap, the twist that made jaws drop and eyes pop. The plane was electric now, buzzing with excitement. The little boy bounced again. "He's awesome," he said. The man in the green shirt high-fived his friend. "Told you she'd regret it." The lady with the gummy bears ate another one, nodding like she'd known it all along. And Marcus? He stood there, calm and tall, the boss's boss who just turned the whole flight into a story nobody would forget. The plane was buzzing after Marcus showed his badge. Everyone knew he was the big boss now, the regional manager for Sky High Airlines, and Karen was in deep trouble. Her face was white, then red, then white again, like a light switching on and off. She stood there in row 14, her hands shaking a little, her tight bun falling apart. Marcus stood tall in his gray hoodie, his badge tucked back in his pocket, looking calm and strong. The passengers were watching, some with big smiles, some with wide eyes, all waiting to see what happened next. Then the cockpit door opened. That's the little room up front where the pilots sit. It made a soft click sound, and out stepped the captain. He was a tall man with a blue uniform, a cap pulled low over his eyes, and a clipboard in his hand. The clipboard was full of papers, important stuff, like lists and rules. He walked down the aisle, his boots thumping on the floor, steady and sure. People turned their heads to watch him. The little girl with pigtails peeked out, her crayon still on the floor. The man in the red hat stopped chewing his gum. Even the lady with the gummy bears forgot her candy and stared. The captain stopped right by row 14. He looked at Marcus first, giving him a little nod like a secret handshake between grown ups. Then he turned to Karen. His face wasn't mad, but it wasn't happy either. It was serious, like a teacher about to give a timeout. "Karen," he said, his voice deep and loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're off this flight. Head to the gate. We'll handle this on the ground." He pointed toward the front of the plane, where the big door was still open by the gate. Karen's jaw dropped. Her mouth fell open so wide you could see her teeth, and her eyes got huge, like two big marbles. She looked at the captain, then at Marcus, then back at the captain. But she started, her voice all wobbly, like she was about to cry. But she couldn't argue. Not with Marcus standing there, tall and steady, his badge proving who he was. Not with dozens of eyes on her passengers from every row, watching her like hawks. She'd yelled at the wrong guy, and now everyone knew it. She didn't say anything else. She just grabbed her bag, a black purse with a zipper fast and clumsy. Her hands fumbled, and the bag almost fell, but she caught it. Her shiny badge clattered against her uniform, making a little sound as she moved. She turned and stormed down the aisle, her shoes clicking loud, click, 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 like she couldn't get out fast enough. Her face was red now, bright red, and her bun was a mess, with hairs sticking out all over. She didn't look back. She just marched to the front, pushed past the open door, and disappeared out to the gate. The passengers watched her go. The little boy with the toy car waved. "Bye-bye," he called, giggling. His dad laughed and ruffled his hair. The lady in 14C, the one with the dog magazine, smiled and shook her head. "Good riddance," she whispered to herself. The man in 14A, the older guy with glasses, pushed his cap back and nodded. "About time," he muttered. The woman with the phone stopped recording and put it down, her grin big and bright. "Got it all," she said to the person next to her, who gave her a high five. Marcus waited until Karen was gone. Then he turned to the passengers. He stood in the aisle, tall and strong, his hoodie soft and his jeans a little faded. He didn't look like a big boss in a fancy suit, but he didn't need to. His voice and his badge were enough. "Sorry for the delay, folks," he said, his voice smooth and clear, like a friendly teacher. "Let's get this flight moving." He gave a little smile, not too big, just enough to make everyone feel better. The plane erupted. Not with yells or screams, but with claps. People started clapping their hands, clap, clap, clap loud and happy. It started with the man in 14A. He put his hands together and clapped once, twice, then kept going. Then the lady in 14C joined in, her magazine still on her lap. The little girl with pigtails clapped too, her tiny hands making soft pat-pat sounds. "Yay," she cheered. The man in the red hat popped his gum pop, and clapped with big, loud slaps. Even the lady with the gummy bears put her candy down and clapped, her purple hat bouncing a little. Some people cheered too. "Woohoo," shouted the man in the green shirt a few rows back. His friend whistled, a high wee sound that made everyone laugh. The boy with the toy car bounced in his seat. "He's the best," he yelled, and his dad clapped harder. The woman with the big purse in row 15 stood up a little and called, "Great job, Marcus." Her voice was loud and happy, like she was at a ball game. The guy in 14A gave Marcus a thumbs up. He held his hand high, his thumb sticking up like a little flag. "You're all right, kid," he said, his grumpy face turning into a smile. Marcus nodded back, his own smile growing just a bit. The clapping kept going, filling the plane with noise, happy noise, the kind that makes you feel warm inside. The captain turned and walked back to the cockpit, his clipboard under his arm. He didn't say anything else, he didn't need to. Marcus had handled it, and now it was time to fly. The big door at the front closed with a loud thump, and the plane started to move. It rolled slow at first, taxiing, that's when it drives on the ground toward the runway. The engines got louder, a big RRRRR sound that vibrated under everyone's feet. The sun shone through the windows, bright and golden, lighting up the seats. The mood shifted. It wasn't tense or heavy anymore. It was light and happy, like a party starting. Marcus sat back down in 14B, his book in his lap, his backpack by his feet. He didn't act like a hero with a cape or a crown. He was just Marcus, calm, cool Marcus who'd stayed steady the whole time. But to the passengers, he was a hero. Not just because he was the boss, but because he'd shown everyone something big: respect matters. It doesn't matter who you are, big boss or regular person, you treat people right. And Karen hadn't done that. The plane picked up speed, rolling faster now. Outside, the airport buildings zipped by, then the grass, then nothing but sky. The engines roared RRRRR, and the plane lifted off, climbing up into the air. People settled back in their seats, some still smiling, some still talking about what happened. "Can you believe it?" the lady with the gummy bears said to the man next to her. He shook his head. "Nope. Wild ride already." The little girl with pigtails looked out the window, then back at Marcus. "He's nice," she said to her mom. Her mom nodded. "Yeah, sweetie. He's a good guy." The man in 14A pulled his cap low and closed his eyes, but he was still smiling. The lady in 14C opened her magazine again, but she kept peeking at Marcus, like she wanted to say thanks. The woman with the phone watched her video, giggling as she played it back. "This is going online," she said to her seatmate. "Everyone's gonna see this." Her friend laughed. "Karen's famous now for the wrong reason." The man in the red hat nodded. "She earned it," he said, popping his gum again. Up in the sky, the plane flew smooth and steady. The clouds were fluffy and white, like cotton candy floating by. Inside, the air felt fresh, not heavy or thick anymore. Marcus had fixed it. He'd stayed calm when Karen yelled, showed his badge when it mattered, and let the truth do the rest. He wasn't just a hero for being the boss, he was a hero for showing that being kind and fair beats being loud and mean every time. But the story didn't end there. Back at headquarters, Sky High Airlines' big office word spread fast. Like, super fast. When the plane landed later, people on the ground already knew what happened. The pilots told their friends. The woman with the phone posted her video online, and it went whoosh all over the internet. Passengers called their families, saying, "You won't believe what I saw." It was like a wildfire, jumping from person to person, hot and quick. Karen didn't just leave the plane that day. She lost her job. Yep, she was fired, gone from Sky High Airlines before the sun went down. The big bosses at headquarters heard everything: how she yelled at Marcus, how she wouldn't check his ticket, how she was mean for no reason. They didn't like it. Not one bit. They sat in a big room with a long table, papers all over, and made a decision. "She's out," they said. "We don't want people like that working here." The airline put out a statement, a fancy note they sent to everyone. It said, "Sky High Airlines has no tolerance for disrespect. We're sorry for what happened on Flight 247. It won't happen again." They typed it up, put it on their website, and told the news people too. Everyone saw it: people at home, people at school, people everywhere. Karen's name wasn't in it, but they didn't need to say it. Everyone knew who they meant. Karen didn't come back. Nobody saw her at the airport again. Some said she moved away, some said she got a different job, maybe selling flowers or cleaning houses. Nobody knew for sure. But one thing was clear: she wasn't a flight attendant anymore. Her badge, her uniform, her loud voice, all gone. She'd stormed off the plane, and that was that. Marcus. He kept doing his job. He didn't brag or show off. He didn't need to. He went back to work the next day, checking on planes, talking to crews, making sure everything ran smooth and fair. He wore his hoodie and jeans sometimes, or a nice shirt other times, but he was always the same Marcus: calm, steady, and kind. He made sure passengers were happy, workers were nice, and flights took off on time. That was his way. Back on Flight 247, as the plane soared through the sky, people settled down. The little boy played with his toy car again, rolling it on his tray. "Vroom vroom," he said, smiling. The lady with the gummy bears ate a green one, then a red one, happy as could be. The man in 14A napped, his cap over his eyes. The lady in 14C read about dogs, turning the pages slow. The woman with the phone kept watching her video, laughing every time Karen's face turned white. The flight went on, smooth and easy. The captain flew the plane, the clouds floated by, and the sun started to dip low, turning the sky orange and pink. Marcus sat in 14B, his book open again, reading about pirates and treasure. He didn't say much more, just let the passengers enjoy the ride. But they didn't forget him. Not that day, not ever. Justice was served, big time. Karen got what she deserved off the plane, out of a job. Marcus got what he earned: claps, cheers, and respect from everyone. The airline made it clear, no more disrespect. And the passengers? They got a story, a wild, true story they'd tell their friends, their families, their neighbors. "You won't believe what happened on my flight," they'd say, and then they'd laugh and cheer all over again. The plane landed later, soft and safe, at its destination. People grabbed their bags, stretched their legs, and walked off, still buzzing about Marcus and Karen. The little girl waved at Marcus as she left. "Bye, boss man," she called. He waved back, his smile warm. The man in 14A tipped his cap again. "Keep it up," he said. The lady in 14C just smiled and nodded. Marcus was the last to leave. He picked up his backpack, slung it over his shoulder, and walked off the plane, steady as ever. The airport was busy outside, people running, bags rolling, planes taking off, but he didn't rush. He'd done his job, fixed the mess, and shown what respect really means. And that was enough. The story ended there, with the plane quiet, the sky pretty, and justice done. Karen was gone, Marcus was great, and everyone learned something big: treat people right, or you might just lose everything. The passengers wouldn't forget it. The airline wouldn't either. And Marcus? He'd keep making sure every flight was fair and fun, one plane at a time. And that's how it all happened, a regular day that turned into a giant lesson nobody on that plane would ever forget. It started out so normal, just another sunny afternoon with people climbing onto Flight 247, ready to fly somewhere fun or visit someone special. The plane was buzzing with chatter, bags were getting stuffed into bins, and kids were giggling in their seats. Marcus Jones walked on board, just a tall guy with a friendly smile, a gray hoodie, and a little backpack. Nobody thought he was anything big, not the passengers, not Karen, not even the lady with the gummy bears munching away in row 15. But by the end, oh boy, they all knew better. It was wild how fast things flipped. 1 minute, Karen was yelling at Marcus, pointing her finger and tapping her foot like she owned the whole plane. She thought he was just some regular guy, maybe someone trying to sneak into a seat that wasn't his. She looked at his hoodie, soft and a little worn, and his jeans faded at the knees, and decided he didn't belong in 14B. She didn't even check his ticket at first. She just snapped and barked, sure she was right, sure he was wrong. Her badge glittered on her uniform, and her loud voice made everybody turn their heads. She judged him fast, too fast, and that was her big mistake. Marcus didn't fight back with yells or mean words. He stayed calm, like a lake on a quiet day, smooth and still. He held out his ticket, said soft things like "This is my seat," and waited. He didn't need to shout or stomp. He had something better, something hidden, like a secret treasure in his backpack. And when the captain's voice came over the intercom crackle, BZZZ, and said, "Please welcome Marcus Jones, Regional Manager for Sky High Airlines," the whole plane gasped. Karen's face went white, her jaw dropped, and Marcus stood up with his badge, tall and steady. He wasn't just nobody. He was the boss's boss, holding all the cards, and Karen never saw it coming. That's the thing about this story, it's a big, loud reminder that sometimes the person you think is small or unimportant is the one with all the power. Marcus didn't look like a manager in his hoodie and sneakers. He didn't have a fancy suit or a loud voice. He looked like a regular guy, maybe your cool uncle or the neighbor who waves when you ride your bike by. But he was so much more. He was in charge of the whole airline in that area, making sure planes flew right and people were treated nice. Karen didn't know that. She saw his clothes, his seat, his quiet way, and thought, he's nothing. She judged him by what she saw on the outside, and boy, was she wrong. Think about that for a second. Karen pointed her finger at Marcus, told him to move, called him a liar, all because she didn't take the time to look closer. She didn't ask questions. She didn't check his ticket until he made her. She just decided she knew everything already. And what happened? She got embarrassed, super embarrassed in front of everybody. The captain sent her off the plane, her badge clattering as she stormed away. She lost her job that day because the airline said, "No more disrespect." She walked off with her head down, and Marcus stayed, getting claps and cheers. All because she judged too fast. So here's the big lesson: next time you're quick to point fingers, think twice. You might be pointing at the wrong person. You might be the one who ends up walking away with a red face, wishing you'd been nicer. Imagine if Karen had just said, "Hi, can I see your ticket," instead of yelling. Imagine if she'd smiled and checked it right away. The whole mess wouldn't have happened. Marcus would have sat down, the plane would have taken off, and nobody would have gotten in trouble. But she didn't. She jumped to the wrong idea, and it flipped everything upside down. That's why this story sticks with you. It's not just about a flight or a fight over a seat. It's about people, how we see them, how we treat them, how we can be so wrong sometimes. Marcus was quiet, but he was strong. He didn't need to yell to win. He just showed the truth, his badge, his job, his calm way, and let it do the talking. Karen was loud, but she was weak. She thought she knew it all, but she didn't know the most important thing, who Marcus really was. And when the truth came out, she couldn't hide from it. Picture this: you're on a plane, or maybe in school, or at the park. You see someone new, someone in plain clothes, someone quiet, someone you don't know yet. Maybe they're sitting alone, or they don't talk much. Do you think, "Oh, they're nobody," and ignore them? Or do you wonder, "Hey, maybe they're cool. Maybe they've got a story I don't know"? Marcus teaches us to wonder. He teaches us to wait, to look, to listen. Because the kid in the old sneakers might be the best artist in class. The quiet girl with the backpack might be a math genius. The guy in the hoodie like Marcus might be the boss of the whole show. Karen didn't wonder. She pointed and yelled, and it got her in big trouble. She walked away embarrassed, her job gone, her loud voice useless. Marcus stayed, and people clapped for him, not because he was loud or fancy, but because he was fair and kind. That's the power in this story. It's not about being the biggest or the loudest. It's about being real, being good, and giving people a chance. Karen didn't give Marcus a chance, and she paid for it. Marcus gave her a chance to check his ticket, to back off, but she didn't take it. And that's why he won. So what can we do with this? Easy: think before we judge. Next time you see someone and your brain says, "They're not important," stop and ask, "Wait, do I really know that?" Maybe they're holding all the cards, like Marcus. Maybe they've got a badge or a talent, or a secret that you can't see yet. Don't be like Karen, jumping to the wrong idea and ending up with egg on your face. Be like Marcus, calm, patient, ready to show the truth when it matters. This happens all the time, you know. Not just on planes, but everywhere. At school, someone might laugh at a kid for wearing old clothes, not knowing that kid's the fastest runner on the team. At the store, a cashier might snap at a quiet customer, not knowing they're the owner's friend. In your neighborhood, a new kid might seem shy, but maybe they're great at building forts or telling jokes. You don't know until you look closer. You don't know until you give them a chance. Marcus got judged by his hoodie and his seat, but he turned it around. He showed that what's inside his job, his heart, his strength matters way more than what's outside. And here's the cool part: you can do that too. You don't need a badge or a big job. You just need to be nice, to wait, to see people for real. Imagine if everyone on that plane had judged Marcus like Karen did. They'd all be mad, and nobody would have clapped. But they didn't. They watched, they listened, and when the truth came out, they cheered. They saw the real Marcus, not just his hoodie. And that's what made the day special: not just Karen getting in trouble, but everyone learning something big. Let's think about Karen for a minute. She messed up, big time. She lost her job, walked off the plane, and probably felt awful. But even she could learn from this. Maybe she sat down later, thought about it, and said, I shouldn't have yelled. I should have checked. Maybe she decided to be nicer next time, wherever she went. We don't know what happened to her after that day, but we can hope she got better. That's the thing about mistakes, they're bad, but they can teach you stuff if you let them. Karen's mistake was loud and messy, but it taught the whole plane and us a lesson. Now picture Marcus, back at work the next day. He's not bragging or showing off. He's just doing his job, checking planes, talking to crews, making sure everything's fair. He's still the guy in the hoodie, still smiling that friendly smile. But now people know, he's not nobody. He's somebody big, somebody good. And he didn't need to yell to prove it. That's the kind of person you want to be, not the loudest, not the meanest, but the steadiest, the kindest, the one who surprises everyone with how great you really are. So next time you're quick to point fingers, remember Flight 247. Remember Karen's red face and Marcus's calm nod. Think twice before you judge. Ask yourself, do I really know who this person is? What if they're holding all the cards? You might save yourself some trouble. You might make a friend. You might even cheer for someone who turns out to be a hero, like Marcus. This story started with a regular day, sunny, busy, normal. But it ended with a lesson nobody forgot. Sometimes, the person you think is nobody is the one running the show. Karen learned that the hard way, tripping over her own quick finger pointing. Marcus showed it the easy way, standing tall with his badge and his truth. And us? We get to take it with us out of the plane, into our days, wherever we go. Don't judge too fast. Look closer. Be kind. You never know who's got the winning hand. That's the magic of this tale. It's not just about a flight or a fight. It's about you and me and everyone we meet. It's about seeing past the hoodie, past the seat, past the outside stuff. It's about waiting for the real story, the one that might surprise you. So next time you're ready to say, they're nothing, pause. Think of Marcus. Think of Karen. And choose to be the one who claps, not the one who walks away embarrassed. That's how you win quietly, kindly, and with all the cards in your heart.